I'm Matt.
I'm Shane.
And if you like what you hear, make sure you hit that thumbs up button real hard, and make sure you subscribe to Comic Movie Marks.
And also click that little bell for all of the notifications.
Whee!
Always remember,
If Trailer Trash can do it,
anyone can do it.
hello and welcome everyone to another Comic Movie Marks video.
Today we are talking the Zack Snyder DCEU Timeline and all the bullshit that he had to go through.
Yeah, I just recently watched Lantern 2814's video of the timeline of the Snyder Cut, so I kind of thought let's piggyback off that and make a sequel to that and kind of talk about Snyder's timeline in general, not just the cut in general, but his timeline going through DC and Warner Brothers and all the bullshit he had to go through, and kind of maybe run a theory by at the very end and what we think may actually have happened with Zack Snyder and his departure from DC.
So we're going to start all the way back in January of 2014. The Wrap released an article, thewrap.com that is, released an article stating Warner Brothers pushes Batman v Superman back 10 months to fully realize vision.
Not the shitty Marvel character.
Yeah, exactly.
That was wasted in Infinity War. So this is kind of where I think it really started for Zack Snyder, and I'm not on a first name basis with him, so I will make sure I added his last name.
Mr. Snyder.
Yeah, yes. And this was pushed back, because remember, originally, Batman vs. Superman was supposed to come out in 2015. So in the article for The Wrap, they have, the studio has pushed back the release of its untitled Batman vs. Superman, how close they were, film to May 6th of 2016, a delay that's nearly 10 months, to allow, in quotations, to allow the filmmakers time to realize fully their vision. Given the complex visual nature of the story, the studio told The Wrap on Friday.
So then, obviously, the Batman v Superman came out. The theater cut was, I guess the director's cut was trimmed down to fit into 2.5 hours. And the theatrical cut was released. Then basically, a couple months go by. I can't remember exactly when the director's cut was released. I want to say June. And all of a sudden, the internet starts apologizing to Zack Snyder after watching Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition. This is an article that was released by Screen Geek in July of 2016, so shortly thereafter. Some interesting tweets that came out. Walker Floyd. So he says, I would like to apologize to @Zack Snyder. I hated on the original version, but his Ultimate Edition of Batman v Superman is really, really good. That tweet was June 29th. The next one from You've Rage, I guess, says Hack Snyder successfully became Zack Snyder again. Can't wait for Justice League. # Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition. And then probably my favorite tweet that Screen Geek included, @WB Pictures. Oh, this is from AF, and their Twitter handle is @Ant4479. They say, @WB Pictures, you owe Zack Snyder an apology. Better release his vision of Justice League theatrically. Batman vs. Superman Ultimate Edition. That tweet was released June 30th, 2016. If you only knew at that point.
Senior AF, you have no idea what was going to unfold. So then in an interview with Collider on June 28th of 2016, the title here, Warner Brothers wouldn't let Zack Snyder release a 3-hour version of Batman vs. Superman. And then in this video interview with Collider and Zack Snyder, Zack Snyder kind of brings up a very interesting thing that happened to him with Watchmen.
A length that was, workable.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say this to you right to your face. I mean, I think that the Watchmen theatrical cut is good, but the director's cut is phenomenal. Like, it just adds those beats that are so key.
I agree 100%. Like, if you ever watch, by the way, the thing that's amazing is, like, if you watch Watchmen on TNT or whatever, they have a TV cut, like the airplane cut, and it's the movie. It's in there. Like, when you watch it, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. But all of the sort of edges get knocked off of it, by this, just the nature of putting something that's kind of that, kind of rough on TV. And I think that in a weird way, like, the theatrical cut is a step up from that. And then the director's cut is really, like, where it's at, in my opinion, just because and with a movie like that, where I was, in a I don't want to say I was in a battle with the studio, but there was definitely I was a little bit, I was probably more headstrong on that movie because the material was so important to me, and so I really wanted. And then they promised me that they would, make this director's cut, and that was where the deal was made. I was like, okay, I'll get you the time. And also, a lot of the time of that movie was dictated by IMAX, at the time, because it was an IMAX release, and there was no digital IMAX. It was all prints, and the prints that movie. If there's humidity in the projection booth, the film will fall off.
Oh, sir, I am well aware.
It's not so.
So that's very interesting that that the studio was going to release his cut. They promised him anyway to release his cut of Batman vs. Superman as the opening DVD, as the Blu-ray. And they felt, or they owed it to him at least. That's what he says. So I find that very interesting that apparently his pull is not, it didn't quite work out with Justice League ultimately, as we will find out.
Yeah, he even says, the article includes this quote as well, when he says, when you get over 2.5 hours, the studio starts getting nervous. I'm not James Cameron, who's like, no, it's 3 hours, suck it. Which is cool, by the way. I just wanted to try and get to a length that is workable. So obviously he doesn't have the pull that James Cameron has, unfortunately, because it'd be nice if Snyder can say, stop dicking with my stuff. I've obviously proven to be successful with the Watchmen director's cut and Batman v Superman, both so much better than the theatrical versions. You'd think that they would have learned.
Well, apparently they didn't, because then June 21st of 2016, Justice League will not be a two-part movie. As we were alluding to in other videos as well, and what Snyder has alluded to as well on Vero, is that Justice League was going to have a two-parter, and it was supposed to be this continuation story. Technically, this whole series of Snyder movies was supposed to be 5, according to Jay Oliva. I think I got his last name right now, finally. And it was supposed to be a 5-parter. We don't know what the 5th one was supposedly going to be, but at least we knew the first 4, and 2 of them were going to be Justice League and Justice League 2. So already on June 21st, they scrapped that idea of a 2-parter, and Snyder seems to be a little questionable, a little bit procured by all this, because he even seems a little confused as well. So when the media came to visit for a set visit of Justice League, a very early on set visit of Justice League, a couple questions were asked to Snyder, and he says, is the second Justice League movie still tethered to this, meaning the first Justice League? Is that something that you still plan to direct? ? It was sort of announced early on in a shareholders meeting, but it sounds like they're closing that off for now. Snyder's response, I think we still have a release date. This isn't part 1 though? You're not looking at it as part 1? And Snyder said, oh, it is a complete movie. I mean, of course and then for some reason there's a lot of dashes, and I don't know if that's like censoring spoilers or not, but I've noticed in some of this stuff with this set visit, there's like these weird dashes that completely end a sentence.
Right. Yeah, very abruptly. So either he trailed off in speaking, or it means that there's more stuff to be continued that you have to remove.
So then already Warner Brothers is shutting down Snyder on what he can do, what he can't do. He's already filming Justice League and planning to do a 2-parter. Justice League started filming in April, and now in June, 2 months later, they decide to cut off the second movie. Man, depending on what he was planning to do with Justice League, that's got to put a lot of problems in the movie, maybe causing a bunch of reshoots, for instance. Again, like I was talking about with that set visit, again, June 21st, 2016, and surprisingly, Warner Brothers released the embargo fairly early off, and people were able to talk about everything they were able to see then. The concept arts, what they were seeing at the time, a lot of different stuff, a lot of things, and it seemed like Warner Brothers was trying to show they had confidence in this movie to try to get the media on their side, which I thought was, at the time, I thought that was a really smart move. But I honestly think this is what shook them a little bit, because not everybody had the warmest response to this. A lot of people were still questioning the movie's abilities.
Well, one of my favorites, a quote from this article, this is from Collider, and they were obviously a part of the set visit. Steve Weintraub is the one writing this article, and he says, one of my big takeaways from the set visit is how the tone of Justice League is going to be a lot different. Unlike Batman v Superman, which was dark and serious, we watched scenes that showed Bruce Wayne can smile, and Flash is going to be played with a lot of fun and youthful energy. He's someone who's really excited to be a big hero. It's a big change and something that should excite the fans and people that didn't think BVS was all that. So obviously, in June of 2016, they can already tell that Snyder was changing the feel of this movie.
And then, of course, in October of 2016, they end principal photography. Justice League is wrapped for the most part. Everybody is on their way, and now here comes all the editing and all the CGI work, all the post work, the post-production work afterwards, and then all the shit that comes after that. Then on February 22nd, 2017, he makes a post on Vero with of course, the infamous now Rorschach saying, never compromise, even in the face of Armageddon. And then, sadly, on May 22nd, the Hollywood Reporter reports Zack Snyder steps down from Justice League to deal with family tragedy.
So Snyder says in that he's stepping away, he says, I've decided to take a step back from the movie to be with my family, be with my kids who really need me. And he does go into more detail, thinking that he wanted to go back to work, just bury himself, and see if that was the way to kind of work through it. And then eventually he decided to take a step back because his family really needed him.
And then the next day, on May 23rd, he posts a picture of him looking out on a lake, just him with some clouds, a very Snyder-esque shot. And then something, after this point, he keeps promoting DC properties on Vero for the most part. He has a picture of him with Patty Jenkins on June 5th of 2017, where obviously they're celebrating Wonder Woman's success. Then he posts the poster for Cyborg on August 6th of 2017, saying, I love RF, Ray Fisher. I hope Ray Fisher, not just something random RF. And then he also posts on August 22nd, last shot of Jason in Iceland, and it shows Jason Momoa in the water. Obviously that one part where he's talking to Bruce Wayne, where he's down in the water in that little island. And so you could tell that he's still promoting Justice League even after he left on Vero and Twitter for the most part. Again, October 25th, released another picture of him and Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot, and he's holding her wrist in a certain position, obviously, when she's about to do her little wrist clap. It looks like during the Superman battle. He's still doing it. He still promotes Justice League constantly.
So then in July of 2017, Mashable.com releases an article stating Zack Snyder's future at Warner Brothers DC movies limited at best, donezo at worst. For its part, Warner Brothers strongly denied the notion that the Snyders would no longer be actively involved in creative decision-making. Toby Emmerich, Warner Brothers Picture Group president and chief content officer, said in a statement that the Snyders would maintain a role. And his statement was, the Snyders remain an important part of the Warner Brothers family and are actively involved in several upcoming DC pictures, including their continued creative input on Justice League. We are excited about our partnership and look forward to our continued collaboration.
So obviously what Toby Emmerich is saying is, they're still going to be part of this. There's nothing nefarious going on necessarily, but they're still being part of the DC universe, obviously just in a smaller role now. I think that's important. This article, I think, is very telling because you have some quotes coming directly from WB and DC, and it does contain some interesting facts about how Jeff Johns is, who swiftly ascended from comic book world to become president and chief creative officer at Warner Brothers DC division last year, reporting to Diane Nelson, president of DC Entertainment. So it talks about how Jeff Johns moved up the ladder and Diane Nelson as well. Then you move on to the Screen Rant article of July 30th of 2017. Do Zack Snyder and Jeff Johns disagree on DCEU's future? So in this article, they pull out an excerpt from a Comic-Con that Jeff Johns appeared at. And the article consists of, during the Spotlight panel on his entire career, Johns was asked about how his skills as a creative officer, inspiring other creators to tell stories true to the heart of DC's heroes, translate into TV shows and now major motion pictures. Explaining his knowledge of DC comic characters and history shifts into leadership role. Johns used a word that may stand out to Zack Snyder fans and critics.
So Jeff Johns says, I work with so many talented people. So there's people that love it and understand it and embrace it. And then there's people that don't know that, and you want to help them learn it. And you want to tell them why a certain storyline for a certain character might not work, or why a take on a character might not work, or what Superman really should be. Very interesting. He continues, but the whole thing is to craft and shape the story and the tone to fit the character and to celebrate the character instead of deconstruct the character. I think you want to celebrate the character because you've got to celebrate something and build it up. I think to really make it into something that represents who the character truly is. And also, the fact that I've written all these comic books gives me a lot of credibility coming into the room because it's hard to argue sometimes. Like, people can tell me what Aquaman is, but if I've written the book, literally, it helps me out. Kind of comes across as egotistical. Fuck.
Yeah.
Just reading those quotes, he comes across kind of like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. And no, I wrote it. That's why I can tell you, okay, well, so you wrote every comic book of Aquaman, every comic book of Superman over the course of since DC has been in existence.
Apparently the only ones that matter.
Oh yeah,
You're missing it.
Yeah, apparently.
So of course, there's obviously the pool from this is, or what Superman really should be, and talking about deconstructing the character, which is something that Snyder was known for doing in Batman vs. Superman, which a lot of people disliked. So there's a lot of war of words there being presented, and kind of interesting. I know a lot of people are back and forth on Jeff Johns, whether or not he's part of this issue, that the problem with Justice League for the most part, was he the main driving force behind it? Was he just somebody that was there at the time, wrong place at the wrong time? I don't know. When you read that type of situation and you read how he ascended up the ladder as Snyder kind of went down the ladder a little bit in the eyes of Warner Brothers, it kind of feels a little bit like there might have been some kind of tomfoolery, as he would, going on there.
I remember, just a quick sidebar here, I remember when it was first announced, that Jeff Johns would be taking over and really have a creative control. I thought that was going to be such a positive thing. He was big in the new 52. I think he pretty much was the catalyst and created the whole thing, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember being incredibly excited, like, okay, we're going to have a direction here. We're going to have someone who did write the comic books. But it seems after a lot of this stuff kind of started unfolding, it really makes you wonder if he was part of the reason why Justice League ended up being a flop ultimately.
And then we move on to another Screen Rant article of November 17th of 2017. If that date sounds familiar to you, it's the day that we all had our heart broken. And then Snyder also mentioned that he hasn't seen Justice League. On Vero, users shared a screenshot of an exchange she had with Snyder where he admitted that he has not seen Justice League. He doesn't offer up a reason why he has not seen the film, only stating that he wishes he had the chance to completely finish his DC trilogy. Zack Snyder says, I will be honest, I have not seen the film since I stepped away. I love these characters. I wish I could only finish it for you and the others who love MOS and BVS.
One thing and maybe people can disagree with this one way or another, but one thing that it would be hard to argue is the fact of how much passion he has for all these characters. Yeah, people say that's not my Superman. He's deconstructed and all this stuff. But even in the video that we showed earlier when he's talking about Watchmen, is he felt that Watchmen should have been 3 hours long because he really wanted to do the material justice. No pun intended. That he wanted to. You could just see the passion in the video of that he knew what that movie was supposed to be, and that's for Watchmen. And every time, he's talking about how much he really loves these characters and wanted to truly to service them properly. And there was a timeline for him of how he was going to get there. And it's disappointing. And even in this little quote that he has where he says, I love these characters. I wish I could only finish it for you. That's heartbreaking.
Then we move on to the wrap of November 29, 2017. How Justice League Became a Frankenstein. It's a wrap exclusive. And it just kind of goes down the whole rabbit hole of what really could have happened. This is where we got the comments about how Sujihara and other executives pushed Justice League out because of the Time Warner and AT&T merger, and they wanted their bonuses. That speculation came out from this. Basically, the wanting to fire Snyder after Batman vs. Superman came from this article. And it stated, after the disappointment of Batman vs. Superman, the individual with deep knowledge of Warner Brothers said studio executives repeatedly went to Silverman to suggest removing Snyder from Justice League. The individual said DC President John Berg was sent to the set for the better part of the year to oversee the production out of budget concerns. It says Warner Brothers declined to comment on this story. The insider said Silverman was, quote, quite harsh on Zack when Batman vs. Superman underwhelmed audiences, but he didn't fire him. Removing a director is a major distraction on any film, and it would be a sign of serious trouble on a tentpole design to support a larger universe. And Han Solo is slowly finding that out right now. How much that
No shit.
They were already deep in prep on Justice League, and it would have cost a fortune. Their stickiness to a director because there's so much cost to unstick him, the insider said. Warner Brothers, that is just weird phrasing. Warner's is a studio that almost to a fault always wants to project strength.
So then something that was very telling, in December, Silverman stepped down as president of Warner Brothers Pictures and was replaced by Toby Emmerich. So you could obviously tell that there's a lot of decisions, people pulling in different directions, and eventually Silverman said, fuck this.
Yeah, and just to kind of clarify, one executive told The Wrap, Sujihara and Emmerich wanted to preserve their bonuses. They would be paid before the merger, and were worried that if they pushed the movie, then their bonuses would have been pushed to the following year, and they might not still be at the studio. There's another quote here. I think Warner Brothers' biggest misstep was not pushing the release of Justice League when Snyder had to step aside, the executive told The Wrap. And I completely agree with that.
Yep, absolutely.
That if they were going to butcher the movie like they did, at least give the guy time to butcher it, so we at least cannot complain about the CGI maybe.
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
They spend a crap ton of money on trying to salvage something to keep it at the same release date, and obviously bonuses were to I guess rumor is the bonuses were kind of to blame for that, but it's just so surprising how much more it could have been maybe well received, or they pushed back another movie for the vision to be, for Batman v Superman, for the vision to be completely fulfilled. And they decided not to for this one. So it's pretty surprising. They spent an ass ton of money, brought in a different director, changed the composer, all the editing, the CGI, when from kind of what we're gathering, a lot of it was pretty close to being done anyways.
So then we move on to February 12th of 2018. The big news, Zack Snyder was fired from Justice League after unwatchable cut. So here we go. Here's the question. There's this, for some reason, everybody can believe in the watchable cut, but yet they don't believe there is a Snyder cut, which is just baffling. That's kind of some weird shit. But this basically comes from Josh L. Dickey, who actually wrote that Mashable article that we were talking about earlier. And this guy has gone through the ringer. He's been unemployed he has moved around from different form of media constantly, so this kind of seems like a way to get your name back out there again, to maybe get a job. I don't know, who knows, but he posted on February 10th, since I'm shifting to don't give a fuck mode, here's a hot one for you. Zack Snyder was fired from the DCEU just over 1 year ago. Couldn't write it quite that way at the time, but was able to tap dance around it. So this is what really started the bullshit right here. This is what really gets things moving, is this particular quote right here, is him saying this. This guy on Twitter, who's bounced around from different forms of media throws this out there, and then you can just type it. It's harder to find anything about Snyder not being fired than there is anything else. Like if you from this tweet alone, yes, there's some corroborating evidence that may or may not help the situation, or go against it, may or may not. But at the same time, it just seems like everybody took it as is. Like, of course he was fired. That's the never compromise thing, the additional issues that they had, and then of course they're using his daughter's death as a cover, for the whole situation.
Right. That was kind of the theory from a lot of people, is that when Snyder's daughter passed away, that was actually used as a cover. So Warner Brothers was like, oh, perfect, he's actually stepping down. They can kind of save face. They're not made to look bad for firing a director. And as mentioned earlier, they can still look strong.
So then there was another article that we actually talked about at the time, but no one else seemed to really give a shit about. But it was on Fandom Wire on February 13th, saying Zack Snyder was not fired from Justice League. And of course, this one doesn't get traction. It was actually very hard for me to even find this goddamn article again, because everything else is about how he was fired. But it basically goes through that it doesn't make sense for him to be fired because he's still a producer on Wonder Woman 2. Him and Deborah Snyder are beginning work on Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman 2. If the studio had fired the 3-time DC director, then he would not be collaborating on a sequel for another DC film. Exactly. And you kind of get this idea, too, as well, with Aquaman. He is still a producer on Aquaman. And yes, that may not be the biggest role in the DC universe that we may all prefer or may not, depending on your outlook. But he still has a role. And it just seems like, to me, it's very hard to say that with the fact that he is still involved with these properties in some way, that he was still pushing out Justice League merch at the same time. What was he really fired? That is one peaceful dude. If he was fired and still willing to work with that same company in a different role, but still work with them for the most part,
right?
And promote their movie that he was fired from. that is one hell of a guy, man.
No shit. An additional thing from this Fandom Wire article: Forbes writer Mark Hughes took to Twitter to debunk the rumor. For those who are confused, and he says the reports claiming #Zack Snyder was fired by WB from Justice League in late January, early February are false. He started working on his edit of the film in early January, and he was still actively working on his edits into May.
Then on February 23rd, the sky opened up, and we got a gift. Whedon was removed from Batgirl. and Joss Whedon was removed from Batgirl, and a lot of people take this stuff as serious, but then Fiona Zhang, she posted it on Vero, the article from The Vulture, and Zack Snyder liked it. So everybody took it that he was fired, and that, of course, he was fired, and now he's hating on the guy that took his spot. Batman on News here also does a little bit of an update on 2/24/18. This morning, Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins liked a tweet about this story as well. So maybe people just don't like Joss Whedon. Maybe that's it. Did you ever think of that? But the other thing is, I see a lot of people banking on the fact that Snyder likes something, and so it must be true. And I personally believe, I know a lot of you guys out there want to believe this, but him doing that, I don't think means anything anymore. He's done it too many times to where it doesn't make sense. I'll be perfectly honest. Some people that listen to us repost our videos on Vero, and he likes those posts. And there's no chance in shit that he's listening to our videos. There's no way. I seriously doubt he is.
I would absolutely love it, and I dream about that happening. as creepy as that sounds, I'm like, yes, Zack Snyder's watching our videos. He's one of the 12 views we have. No.
This is a good meme right here if we were really good at this, but it would be like that part, spoilers for Deadpool if you haven't seen it, but where Deadpool has the thing through his head, Deadpool 2 anyway, where he has the thing through his head and Colossus is slowly coming down to pick him up. That's Snyder, and you're Deadpool.
Yeah, exactly.
With the scissoring and shit. With the fucking...
I get so lost sometimes. Days pass.
Yeah, that's what I dream about. But I digress. Just another side thing. Clay Anos also liked that article as well, which is a close friend of Zack Snyder's. So I do agree. I think he likes posts for one reason or another. As Matt said, he has liked posts with our videos on it. Do I think he's actually watching them? Unfortunately, no. But who knows? Who knows what the meaning behind that could be? Or maybe it is. Maybe he's like, well, fuck this guy. He messed up my movie. I've heard that he's messed up my movie. I actually haven't seen it, and I'm glad he was fired. Who knows?
Okay, so then we move to Deadline. This is actually quite recent, May 28th of 2018. Snyder says that the next project he's working on is The Fountainhead. According to Deadline, the Fountainhead rights of the Ayn Rand library to the production elements is owned by Warner Brothers. And why? So now he's starting a whole new project, a whole new movie, a very controversial movie at that, with Warner Brothers. And then just recently, on May 31st, not too long ago, he confirmed that he is producing on Wonder Woman 2. So he's that earlier article talking about how he's working with Patty Jenkins. Him and Deborah Snyder are still working with Patty Jenkins on Wonder Woman 2 seems to be true. So is this guy actually fired from Justice League? I don't think so. I mean, I think we can kind of say that he wasn't, but was there some kind of agreement of leaving the project and him feeling overwhelmed because of the situation that he was in with his family and what was going on with them? Maybe Warner Brothers wasn't working with him in the way he needed them to complete the project. Maybe he did want to push Justice League back and they didn't want to push it back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe there is some kind of mutual agreement to depart. And then, of course, WB scrambles and tries to get the movie out in November, and it completely backfires in their face. And he knew it was no longer his movie.
Yeah.
He knew it wasn't going to be what he did before, so he's not going to watch it, and, he's not going to see it. He's not going to see it for the most part. He's still going to post, promoting the movie for them. I mean, it's still Justice League. It's still characters he cares about. So I don't know if this really necessarily debunks the idea that Snyder was fired by WB, but I think he maybe had issues with people in DC Entertainment, and that's why there was such a shakeup when it came to the DC Entertainment aspect of it all.
Yeah.
That is why, John Burr got moved out. Kevin Tsujihara has been kind of put on the back burner right now, and now you got Walter Hamada in there. Jeff Johns, he's moved down the ladder quite a bit. Joss Whedon has pretty much been removed from all superhero projects in the DC universe. So it seems like there was a idea and it backfired on a lot of different people. I mean, Diane Nelson too, she's also gone as well, I believe. I mean, it seems like there was an idea to push this thing forward, and it just flopped in their face, and those people paid the consequences for it.
Yep, and I'm hoping that whoever is in charge of all of these, adjustments, all the moves and such that have been made since the flop of Justice League, I'm hoping they realize what should have been, and also the amount of money that was spent, the time and everything that was wasted, future films that could possibly be affected. I mean, you had a solid progress moving, and it was completely scrambled. I absolutely think someone at some point, and this is just my theory, took advantage of Zack Snyder stepping away, whether it was Joss Whedon, Jeff Johns, whoever you want to point the finger at, and said, okay, now that he's out of the picture, that's perfect. Now we can release what we think the film should be. Let's just make it this fucking Frankenstein, as was said in an earlier article.
This bootleg Marvel movie.
Yeah, basically a bootleg Marvel movie, and we're gonna be the saviors of the DC universe. Wrong-o, or whatever the fuck Kevin Spacey's line was. Wrong.
Yeah, there we go. Wrong-o.
Yeah.
You nailed it, man.
I'm thinking Wrong-o is the Grinch, I'm pretty sure. Wrong-o. Go ahead and include that clip in there. So I mixed Jim Carrey and Kevin Spacey and came with Wrong-o. Anyways. moving right along. But I do think that, in my opinion, I feel that that's what happened, is that they took advantage of that. And yeah, absolutely. As Matt said, Zack Snyder was probably under a lot of stress where he's thinking like, hey, you know, let's push this back. And they're basically like, nope, fuck you. And he goes, you know what? Not worth it. My family needs me anyways. He steps aside. I do think that there is enough there to keep him working with Warner Brothers. He's worked with Warner Brothers for a long time. A lot of his movies have been released under that umbrella. And he continues with the Fountainhead to want to stay working with them. And I also think that's why he is being more politically correct with his Vero post. We haven't heard the full story. If he was like, fuck you guys, I'm out of here, then I would think that he would actually release like, no, this is what happened. Let me sit down and have an interview with someone and talk about what all went down. But he obviously he doesn't want to burn that bridge. He wants to keep that relationship, continue to move forward. So maybe he has a strong relationship with a higher up, and maybe moving forward, they'll have a little bit more confidence in him and his vision.
Which actually does give me hope again for a Snyder Cut. I really do think that we will get one, maybe fairly soon. So Comic-Con's rolling around. I don't know if we'll get any information there, but I could see it now. If he's still working with them, and it was more of a mutual agreement of him leaving, then I feel that definitely lends itself to him working on a Snyder Cut eventually. And hopefully it comes down the road. Hopefully decisions are made, proper decisions, and they're executed properly.
Yep, absolutely. I would love for anybody, whether it's Hamada or whoever, to release the Snyder Cut and say, we're actually considering that canon and not the theatrical release of Justice League. And wash our hands and move on. Yay! that would be and that's a pipe dream in a perfect world, but that would be my preference.
In case I don't see you.
Good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. You're one of very few to make it to the end.
Yes, thank you very much.
Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Comic Movie Marks Podcast and hit the notification bell. You know, all these fucking YouTube channels say this shit, so I'm going to say it now.
Yes, it's perfect. And if you want to hear our full podcast, you can check out our podcast on iTunes or any other podcast subscription service.
Make sure you subscribe. Thanks again.